Until Mark Davis steps aside and lets somebody of a professional nature who actually understands what his father stood for, there's no chance they're going to win.
I can't imagine that Antonio Pierce will be back next year. The product on the field is bad. You go to a Raiders home game, and if it's against the Chiefs or 49ers or Steelers, you feel like you're at home game for the opponent.
Well, we have a lot to get to in this morning on a Monday morning, but we wake up to the news out here in the desert that you fire a couple coaches here in the front office. The front office does, but really the big one, Luke Getsy, as the offensive coordinator, has been let go here by the Raiders after another disappointing loss yesterday in Cincinnati. What's your take on that? Did you see this change-up coming for Antonio Pierce's staff?
I wasn't surprised when I went to bed last night. I anticipated some type of change. Look, you know, when you listen to the head coach, Antonio Pierce, and his comments here the last couple of weeks, you got the sense he was getting frustrated with what was happening offensively with Luke Getsy. Look, this is an all too common occurrence with the Raiders, right? We saw this last year during the season. We've seen it again this year. It's just an absolute mess. And I think you hire a head coach that doesn't have experience. You hire an offensive line coach who's never been an offensive line coach in the NFL. He's been an assistant, but he's never really had to run that room. And, you know, you got a quarterback coach. You know, it's really not a good situation there with the Raiders. And I think the other problem is that, you know, you look at the football team itself. At some point, we can keep firing general managers. We can keep firing head coaches and position coaches. But at the end of the day, how about the players? I mean, they lead the national. They have 19 giveaways this year. It's the most in the NFL, and it's not even close. You know, they can't play defense. They're supposed to be really good on defense. They're not good on defense. Joe Burrow threw for 5 touchdowns yesterday. At some point, somebody in the locker room needs to look around and say, you know what, guys? How about we play better football? How about we practice harder? How about we pay a little bit more attention to the details? I just, you know, I think it really gets back to the culture and the environment in the building. And to me, that's where I'd start.
Rich, but you can't start there because what happened was all the players complained to Mark Davis that it was too hard before. And so they went for a kinder, gentler program with Antonio because he was, quote unquote, a player's coach. So you fired McDaniels. And look, I'm not defending Josh. He made a lot of mistakes there, but he was trying to hold people accountable, trying to have harder practice, but the Patriot way wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to smoke cigars in the locker room. They wanted to celebrate their freedom. And now that they have all this freedom, they stink. But they can go to Dairy Queen after the game, which is always important because everybody participated. I mean, that's the most important thing, participation. Forget about winning. I mean, you know, you and I have been part of I think you and I are the last time that actually franchise mattered, to be honest with you. And until Mark Davis steps aside and lets somebody of a professional nature who actually understands what his father stood for, there's no chance they're going to win.
Michael, you and I know what the issues are there, and it's just frustrating to watch it, right? We keep hoping it's going to get better. You keep hoping that, you know, somebody will come in there and really help to change the. I really believe, as we've talked about, it has a lot to do with the history, and I think, you know, when you look at what's happening right now, it's just a continuation of so many bad decisions over the years, and I just, you know, I'm not going to get into naming coaches and players and things like that. I don't want to beat up on them too bad, but it's not good. I mean, it's really not good. The product on the field is bad. You go to a Raiders home game, and if it's against the Chiefs or 49ers or Steelers, you feel like you're, you know, at a home game for the opponent. I mean, it's just, the fans are frustrated. I get beat up on social media. They've had enough. They want to fire everybody. You know, at some point, you know, you have to look at the whole operation. I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen at the end of the season. I can't imagine that Antonio Pierce will be back next year. But, you know, it's I don't know who he's listening to. That's the other thing, right? Like, Mark has had a lot of people in his ears over the years. I don't know who he's listening to and if he's getting the right advice.
Let me ask both you guys this question because the trade deadline is Tuesday. You've already jettisoned Devontae Adams to the Jets. Would you look at Max Crosby? Rich, I'll start with you. Michael, you guys, would you think about really, if you got nothing left here in the cupboard this year, an overhaul and try to get picks for a guy like Crosby who seems like he would command a lot in the open market? Rich, I'll start with you.
Well, he's their best player, right? And I think he's the guy that brings the most energy. He plays, you know, he's got a relentless passion and pursuit of the ball, and you love that about him. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I don't know what kind of leader he is. I don't know what type of impact he has on the rest of the football team. But, you know, I don't know. Michael's sat in that chair.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. So I don't know from a personnel perspective what that would look like moving forward. But, I just think there's so much work to do that I don't think there are any sacred cows. I don't think that any one player right now can fix some of the issues that the Raiders have.
I think it starts at the top. Before I start working at the bottom of the roster, I would figure out how we're going to lead this franchise, how we're going to restore what the Raiders really stand for. And what I would do is start there. And it also starts with the culture that we're going to hold people accountable, that we're going to work hard, that we're going to have pride and poise, and that we're going to develop a team that we know can fit the mold of what this organization was built on. And until we get that, until we hire somebody who can run the entire football operation, who can hire the right people, who can build an organization from within, who can scout from within, who can develop talent from within, who sets the standard of excellence. There is no standard of excellence in that building. This is what most NBA teams do. They trade for a point guard because they need a point guard, or they trade but their culture is so bad it doesn't matter. The players never play as good for them as they did for someone else. So to me, Mark's got to make a decision. How do I want to build it? It needs to be a complete remodel. And Antonio Pierce isn't qualified to remodel a living room, let alone a franchise worth $8 billion. So I agree. I wouldn't trade Crosby. I would hire somebody, whether it's Mike Vrabel, whether it's Kirby Smart, whether it's somebody that comes in who's bigger than the program that you can't fire, right? That the players can't run to Mark Davis and complain and say, I want him fired. And then Mark's got to let the guy do his job. That's the problem. Go ahead, Rich.
No, I just to say one other quick point, Michael. At the end of the day, right, we can talk a lot about what you're talking about, which makes total sense. Trust me, I've been in that building. I worked there. But we fired 30 head coaches in the last 4 years, with the exception of Staley in Los Angeles. Every one of those coaches got fired for the same reason. They had no quarterback. Even Bill Belichick, their quarterback room wasn't good. And he's the greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest head coach of all time. He got fired because the quarterback room wasn't right. We fired 30 head coaches in 4 years. The Raiders don't have a quarterback. I don't care who they play this week moving forward. They don't have a quarterback. And that's a big part of the problem. I'm not suggesting that if Peyton Manning went in there or Drew Brees or even Tom Brady, when he was able to play, would all of a sudden turn their fortunes of that franchise around. It takes more than just one player. But that's if you don't have one, this is a bad business to be in. And you just look around the league. The teams that have that quarterback aren't having these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like Pittsburgh has Mike Tomlin, though, and he don't really have a quarterback, but he's got a culture. Now they complain in Pittsburgh because he's not winning enough. I agree with you. You got to have that, but you got to have a structure in place even when you have a quarterback. Look at Jacksonville; they think they have a quarterback. They just paid him $280 million, and they have no structure in place. I mean, speaking of that game, what was your reaction to Philadelphia's game management in that game?
Mike, I put out a post yesterday on Twitter, and it just drives me crazy. I watch this league very closely. 30 coaches have been fired in the last 4 years. We've already fired a coach this year. We'll fire probably another 5 or 6 before it's all said and done. I think we could have a short list of who's on their way out. Now look at some of the decisions. And I'm not suggesting that Nick Sirianni is going to be out in Philadelphia, although, if they struggle down the stretch, they've won 4 straight. But you look at the decision making. They're up 16-0, they go for 2. They're up 22-0, they go for 2. At some point, kick it. The odds of converting a 2-point conversion in the NFL are 50%, around 50%. The odds of converting an extra point attempt by kicking it are up around 95%. And so we're chasing points early in the game when we don't have to. I scratch my head and I go, what are we doing? What message are we trying to send? If we're going to listen to the analytics people up in the booth, that's fine. Look, analytics there's a place for them in our game, but not to the extent that you're not looking at the injury situation, the flow of the game, the pace of the game, how your defense is playing, how their offense is playing. I mean, all these things have to factor into it. Field conditions, weather, wind, all that. I just think we're just looking at these stats, these numbers, and say the analytics guys, go for it. I mean, look at the situation in Seattle. I mean, they're in overtime. The quarterback's already thrown 3 interceptions, 2 in the red zone. And what do? Instead of kicking the field goal, they decide to go for it on 4th down and get stuffed. I mean, these are the things that get you fired in the NFL.
This is just like music to my ears, gentlemen. I can just listen to this all day because it's exactly what. Like, I just want T-shirts that say "Take the points, Rich." Like, when did it become like a bad thing to take the points? I don't understand it. Chasing points when you're up 16-0, 22-0. Eagles almost blew that lead. So right there with you guys. And again, I think you guys both phrased it perfectly. Yes, analytics are a necessity. We got to meld those in with coaching. It can't just be just follow the book. It can't be that way. You got to have a head coach that knows when to use it and know the personnel of his team. Rich, we really always enjoy the conversation on Monday. Thanks for hopping on the Progressive Guest Line with us.
You guys are the best. Thanks.
Thanks,
Great
Rich.
stuff.
Thanks for watching, but don't let the betting insights end here. If you want an extra edge this football season, you can get a month of VSiN Pro right now absolutely free. That means access to our betting insights, analysis, and tools like our betting splits at zero cost to you. Click the link in the description to sign up.